People come in, we'd love to hear where you live and where you vote, if you want to put that in the chat, because we have invited our LGBTQ caucus, all of our members, and with a special call out to Wisconsinites Abroad. So feel free to note in the chat where you're from. Texas, New York, Virginia, Shanghai, Serbia, London, New Jersey, Norway. Well, there we go. Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, Toronto.
Yes. We are live on Facebook.
All right, terrific. Madison, Wisconsin voter in Germany. Great. All right, well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Really delighted that you're all here and we're able to come for our Pride Month event. My name is Martha McDevitt Pugh, and I'm one of Democrats Abroad's DNC representatives. I also serve as the recording secretary of the DNC LGBTQ Caucus. And at DA, I'm the vice chair of the Democrats Abroad LGBTQ+ Caucus. And I'm going to be your co-host today, together with Bob Vallier in Italy, who's the chair of the DA LGBTQ Caucus. We're also joined today by Democrats Abroad Vice Chair Art Shankler and DA Vice Chair for the Americas Steve Nardi in Toronto, and Teresa Ritterhoff, who's our membership engagement leader. So before I hand off to Art to introduce our very special guest, Senator Tammy Baldwin, I want to welcome all of our caucus members, allies, and our Wisconsin voters. DA is working really hard to get Senator Baldwin a Democratic Senate colleague. And this has been a really big week with 2 events where we've invited the Democratic Senate candidates. We had to split it over 2 events because there's so many of them. And the second one is tomorrow. So please join if you can. I'm going to pop the link in the chat in a moment. And we're also calling our Wisconsin voters as part of Dialing for Democracy and checking to make sure that they've requested their ballots and to offer any assistance they may need, which is another opportunity for you to help mobilize our voters and get trained to do phone banking. So I'm going to put that link in the chat box as well. And with that, Art, please introduce our guest.
Hi, thanks, Martha. And I just want to say on behalf of Democrats Abroad, I want to thank all of you for joining us, particularly Senator Baldwin, and thank the LGBTQ+ caucus plus the Wisconsin team for organizing this event. I think one of the great things about Democrats Abroad over the last few years is the growth of our caucuses and the opportunity that they've given for Americans around the world to get involved and to express their opinion and ultimately to vote, hopefully this November. That's really important. Senator Tammy Baldwin is the junior US Senator from Wisconsin. Senator Baldwin has committed her life's work to public service, fighting for fairness, equality, and opportunity because she believes that with each passing year and each generation, our country must become more equal, not less. In 1998, Senator Baldwin was elected as Wisconsin's first female member of Congress and the nation's first openly LGBTQ+ challenger sent to Congress. In 2012, she became the first woman from Wisconsin to serve in the Senate and the first openly LGBTQ+ senator ever elected. But as she said, she's not in the Senate just to be a symbol. She's there to get things done and make life better for Americans. Senator Baldwin is a leading co-sponsor of the Equality Act. Please join me in welcoming the Senator. Senator Baldwin, the floor is yours. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I am delighted to get a chance to join all of you and take the conversation where you'd like to bring it. You've already referenced a very exciting race for US Senate in Wisconsin with multiple candidates in the primary. It's also Pride Month, and we have a lot to celebrate and also a lot of work yet to do. And as I was mentioning before we went live in Wisconsin, for those of you who are Wisconsinites, June is a month where we celebrate Juneteenth, Gay Pride, and Dairy Pride. So I've been very busy when I've been home these past few weekends, celebrating a lot. But we have some real challenges that lie ahead, and all of those will be eased when there's maximum participation in elections. And I know that's a lot about what you do as Democrats Abroad. So thank you for that. Thank you for having me. And let's let the Q&A begin.
Well, okay, that was a very brief for a politician introduction on your part. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here and for taking the time to be with us. I'm Bob. I'm the chair of the LGBT Caucus, and I live here in Florence. That's the street right around the corner from me. I've got all my gay swag on, which I normally don't wear, but I dragged it out of the closet, including this. Maybe you remember this because I came running up to you at the convention in 2012 wearing this hat.
Yes, I love it.
You know, and I think at this time we have to add a word, you know, make America safe to be gay again. Change
Yes.
the space a little bit here. And you know, my first question has something to do with precisely that. It didn't happen today, but it could happen tomorrow. The Roe decision. Certainly going to happen before June 24th. You know, primarily it's a concern for women because they're the primary target of it, but it's a concern for all of us. Human rights are women's rights and vice versa, but they're also LGBTQ rights. And why? Because Roe affirms a finding from Griswold that Americans do in the penumbra of the First, Fourth, Fifth, and Ninth Amendments, plus the 14th, enjoy something like a right to privacy. And the reason this is important for the LGBT community is because subsequent decisions like Lawrence versus Texas in 2002, and more recently Obergefell, Lawrence decriminalized homosexuality in 2002. And Obergefell made marriage equality the law of the land. Both of those are predicated, at least in part, on the right to privacy. So if Roe is struck down, this affects not only women's right to choose, this affects the right to privacy for all of us. And so even though in the leaked opinion, Justice Alito says, don't worry, you have nothing to worry about. It's just about this. Should we be worried? What do you think is the landscape in a post-Roe America for the LGBT community?
Well, thank you for that heavy question to get started on, but so important for us to talk about and to educate about and to organize around. The leaked decision is really all we have to go on right now. We don't know whether a final decision will be significantly different or slightly different, softened at the edges, who knows? But, you know, in my memory, this is such a significant step backwards. Not only does it attack nearly 50-year-old precedent, not only does it seem to indicate that several justices who during their hearings said, I respect precedent and this is well settled precedent, but it's the first time I can remember where a constitutional right was stripped away, and freedom to control one's body, freedom to control one's decisions about family and whether and when to start a family, freedom to control your health care is all right now, you know, every appearance is that it will dissolve. And the resulting landscape is that it will be different in every state of the union. We also heard whispers in DC that the next step, if Republicans took control of the Congress, that they would have a nationwide ban, and then it wouldn't matter which state somebody lived in. This is a huge decision with huge ramifications, just with regard to bodily, familial, and healthcare autonomy. the implications that you suggest about other areas of life that this could lead to the Supreme Court invasion in are real. Contraception is probably the issue that most speculate would come next. But if you look at the reasoning in the leaked draft decision, that reasoning is completely parallel to the reasoning that led to the overturn of sodomy laws in Lawrence. It's completely parallel to many of the marriage equality arguments. And you could see where one thing would lead to another. And so I think we need to be very vigilant, as well as having a long-term strategic focus on how we get back to a national protection for a woman's right to control her own body, her own family decisions, as well as her own health care. Just as it took 50 years for the stalwart opponents to Roe versus Wade to stack the court and get rid of it, it's going to take time, energy, and voter participation to reverse the damage that we're expecting any day now.
So I want to just quickly follow up on that, because, you know, as you spin it out, not just for the LGBT community, but for everybody. I mean, you know, it's about the criminalization of same sex. It's about the destitution of marriage equality. But it's also, you know, there could be data privacy issues as well. So the algorithm already knows that gay teens are gay before they do, right? And that information could be bought and sold by governments. We point to places like Russia and Hungary as particularly worrisome, but it's no less worrisome in the United States. We talk about home invasion. Already there's been a Supreme Court decision about border police being able to enter your homes on the suspicion that you're harboring illegal aliens. The whole state of Michigan, from which I hail, is technically within that zone, apparently. Just hours ago, the Supreme Court issued a decision that strikes at the very heart of the separation of church and state. You know, when you start to talk these things out a little bit, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to imagine a white supremacist theocracy in the making right now. So do you think there's any concrete action short of a constitutional convention or the passage of another amendment to the Constitution that could protect the right to privacy in the wake of Roe?
Yeah, well, I do think that it still would be extremely important for the Congress to codify Roe, so we are not completely reliant on you know, the decision making of 9 justices on the Supreme Court. I'm one of the primary co-sponsors of the Women's Health Protection Act, which we have brought to the Senate for a vote. As you know, the Senate has strange filibuster rules that require 60 votes to pass a measure rather than a simple majority. And so we were not able to codify Roe versus Wade. I will add that the Women's Health Protection Act goes the step further of preventing states from curtailing the rights enunciated in Roe versus Wade for reasons other than protection of mother's health and life. So in other words, we've seen any number of ways to fetter people's access to abortion care and the rights, privacy rights in Roe versus Wade. But I wanted to just, pick up on the theme of, say, data privacy, because one of the things we learned in the wake of states passing onerous restrictions to access to reproductive health care, comprehensive reproductive health care, is data brokers the ones that can follow where you have been, being willing to sell that data. So if we have smartphones, iPhones and Androids and whatever, we now know from the mapping devices and other things that there's data on where we travel. And if a data broker were to decide to deal with people who had, say, been in the parking lot adjacent to a Planned Parenthood clinic for, say, 3 hours, that could be one of the consequences of what we're seeing. I joined a number of senators when we were hearing that this type of sale of data was going on, to talk or to alert those folks and say, don't do this. But I think just that was our first foray. I think we're gonna have to look at how we protect that data privacy moving forward with regard to many different instances.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, this question of federalism about what's going on in the states and what's going on at the federal level is the subject of our next 2 questions. So I want to pass it back over to Martha to ask the next one.
Great, thanks, Bob. So Senator Baldwin, last year we were talking about the Equality Act and the filibuster, and we had some hope that legislation was going to be able to move, which it hasn't yet. But now we've seen a proliferation of anti-LGBTQ legislation at the state level, quite a lot in the last year. And it's looking like the stripping away of LGBTQ plus rights could be really central to the Republican efforts to mobilize their voters in 2022. I'm just wondering, how do you think this could play out, and how can Democrats change the narrative?
Yeah. Well, first, let me start with the Equality Act, because I, for one, have not given up all hope. And I think if I recall what I was reporting to you last year, it was, without revealing identities, about the conversations I was having with Republicans who I really felt wanted to get to yes, but there were some concerns that were preventing them from getting there. And I did a lot of listening last year in those one-on-one meetings with my Republican colleagues. And so now, I think especially related to the last question about the direction the Supreme Court is moving in, there is a bipartisan interest in, say, securing the rights in the Bostock decision. So for those of you who haven't followed it closely, last year, the Supreme Court did something good. They ruled in a case that said that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, as to its focus on prevention of sex discrimination, that the word sex included sexual orientation and gender identity in employment circumstances. That is part of what the Equality Act seeks to codify. So the Equality Act goes much further. It covers employment, housing, education, public accommodations, jury duty, credit, and a whole host of other things. But I think when we look at what the Supreme Court is on the verge of doing, there's an interest in making sure that, that we codify some of the rights that we have won either at the state level or at the federal level through court action, just because we have new members of the Supreme Court who might not have decided these cases the same way if the legal question comes before them again. And using that interest on the part of my Republican colleagues, we're really trying to see whether there's any compromise language that would still allow us to move ahead. So we haven't abandoned that, but we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket. And certainly as it relates to actions in states, we have got to sound the alarm. allies and members of the LGBTQ community have got to communicate so there's greater understanding of the horrendous things that are happening in states like Texas and Florida. I know that there's a number of folks who identify as voting in one of those two states that are Democrats abroad. These are moves at the state level that are going to have very harmful impact, especially on our young people. The idea that in Texas they're going to pursue parents who are providing their children with gender conforming healthcare and support. In Florida, that the Don't Say Gay in educational contexts has passed into law. All these have implications that make young people in those communities or in communities not in those states where they've heard about it, potentially feel less than, and certainly subject to things like other discrimination and bullying, et cetera. So we've got to have their backs. We've got to speak out and educate, and we've got to pursue what we can at the federal level or local levels to protect those young people in particular.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. We also have a question that came in on the chat. Let me just, and that's if you have anything to say about the recent resolutions that were passed in Texas by the Republican Party recently.
Oh my goodness. Well, I already mentioned the law that was passed relating to pursuing parents who have trans children and are making sure that they have access to gender confirming care. But this last weekend, there was the Texas, I guess, Republican state convention, or at least they were working on their state Republican platform. And they explicitly went backwards in so many areas that impact the LGBTQ community. When I say go backwards, I'm saying, going back to the days where being gay or lesbian or bisexual was viewed as a psychiatric illness, and same with being transgender. Going back to the days before, the recent days before we had access to marriage equality. Standing that party in Texas is firmly opposed to many of the recent successes and victories that we've had in our march towards greater equality and equity. It was pretty shocking to see the many ways in which they're reshaping themselves as a party that would take us back to some never real image of 1950s families, Leave It to Beaver, and those of us who are old enough to remember those stereotypes that actually never were reality, but that's where the Texas Republicans want us to land.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks. Teresa, next from our Wisconsin team. Teresa, would you ask your question?
I'd be happy to. Senator Baldwin, thank you so much for being here with us today. It is so wonderful to have one senator from Wisconsin that we can be proud of. And as we've discussed here at Democrats Abroad and Wisconsinites Abroad, we're doing everything we can to get you a better colleague in the Senate in 2023. Ron Johnson is an embarrassment to our state. He's a disgrace to our country. And we want to end his career this November. So my question is, Well, I just first want to note that this is a race I think everyone should be invested in, whether or not they vote in Wisconsin. This is one of our best chances to unseat an incumbent GOP senator. And this is why I wanted to ask you, because I know that you're in touch with your constituents back home. What is it that is driving voters this election season? What's going to get them to the ballot box? If you can't, maybe there's more than one thing.
Oh, yes.
I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, so let me start with Democratic primary voters. So we, as you know, have an 8-way race for the right to, or not the right, but for the nomination. And I think there's probably a different set of motivators for Democratic primary voters than general election voters per se, but also given the particulars of this year. What I mean by that is most Democratic primary voters are looking at two things. One, obvious: which of these 8 candidates do I think represents my values? Do we think alike? Are they championing the issues that I care most deeply about? But secondly, I think Democratic primary voters get it that we need to defeat Ron Johnson for all sorts of reasons, including keeping Democratic control of the United States Senate and strengthening that margin. And so they're also looking at that, we need our nominee to win. And there are certainly, this field of Democrats shows what a great farm team we have, what a great bench we have, to use some sports metaphors for all of this. But one of them is going to end up our nominee. And I'm very focused, since I'm not going to weigh in on the primary and put my thumb on the scale. My focus is making sure that on day one, after the August primary, that our nominee is ready to hit the ground running, that there's not going to be a huge gap as they reshuffle, that we're going to have a unified party where all of the other candidates who didn't make it through the nomination process are behind our nominee. And so that's been my focus. And there's a lot of things that people can do on the call to help us get ready for that day one after our late primaries. But in terms of general election voters, midterms are always predicted to be a big headwind for the party who does not control, or who controls the presidency. So that's Democrats right now. And the races are often a referendum on people's view of how the nation is doing, because that gets laid at the feet of the president. And so there will be, without a doubt, a lot of focus on the economy and how we continue to recovery from the hits that our economy took during the pandemic, how people get ahead. Inflation will definitely be an issue. And there will be additional focus on who is focused on fighting for the people of our state. And I think that is one of the biggest vulnerabilities for Ron Johnson. For those who don't follow this as closely as I do, he announced his reelection not in the Wisconsin State Journal, but the Wall Street Journal, which is not, by the way, published in Wisconsin. In that piece that he wrote announcing his candidacy for reelection, he mentioned the word Wisconsin once. This wasn't about putting his hat back in the ring for reelection because he wanted to help Wisconsinites get ahead, and had a host of ideas of how to do that and how to make life better and how to help with the struggles that our state is facing. He had a completely different line about why he was running. And a lot of it has to do with embracing the conspiracies that we've seen abound. So I think our candidate, as long as they are focused squarely on the opportunity of work and getting ahead, fighting to bring costs down as we see inflation, like Democrats have been, trying to get the cost of prescription drugs down, trying to get the cost of childcare down, trying to get the cost of gas down, all of these things that families struggle with every day. But we're the ones fighting to change that. And then I think all of us need to just be underscoring that. The last thing I would say, not so much about Ron Johnson's vulnerabilities, although it is a vulnerability of his because he did not vote for the infrastructure law. He did not vote for the American Rescue Plan. But even though these candidates didn't serve in the Senate when we passed those, they certainly can reflect that not a single Republican from the Wisconsin delegation supported either of those two things, and that their goal will be to see them faithfully and fully implemented, because these are once in a lifetime pieces of legislation, and we as Democrats should not be running from them and just looking at the next challenge, but we should be broadly, I think, running victory laps to say, you know, everyone's going to have broadband in the next few years because of what we passed. And we're going to get rid of every last lead pipe lateral in drinking water systems. And we are going to make sure that we have resilient infrastructure that can withstand the extreme weather events we're seeing with climate change. And those are all very positive messages that I know our nominee will run with.
That's great, Senator. I love it. Fight and faith. That's really good messaging, and I think will really resonate with Wisconsinites. Thank you so much. Reminder to all the Wisconsinites on the call, June 25th is coming up. That's ballot drop for Wisconsin primary, and which is August 9th. Thank you so much, Senator Baldwin.
Thank you so much. It's been a joy to join you.
Allora, sorry, I'm speaking Italian. Thank you, Senator. Do you have a few minutes to stick around as we wrap up, or do you need to run?
I do sadly need to run. My next meeting is not on my Zoom screen, but in my office about 5-minute walk away. So I have to
Thank you very much for joining us. And before you go, I do want to, this is a total shot in the dark here, but one of our big events coming up is the weekend of August 5th in Amsterdam. It's the Canal Pride event. We've got a boat in the parade. So if you happen to find yourself that weekend, please do drop by. Let us know, even just a few hours ahead of time, and we'll make sure you're taken care of.
That sounds fabulous. Send pictures if nothing else.
We'll send lots of pictures. Thanks again for being here. It really means a lot to us. And when you're ready to go up for re-election, we'll be here for you then too.
Thank you so much. All right. Happy Pride.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks again to the Senator for joining us. It was great to have her here. As she said, it really does make a difference when we speak out about our lives and the need for equality legislation. It makes a difference because it will motivate LGBT voters to go out and vote in primaries and in midterm elections. When they know that the candidates in the Democratic Party are standing up for their rights and for things that matter to them, they will be motivated to vote and to elect Democrats. It's something we all need to do in this election. You can help us win this election in two ways. You can request your absentee ballot right now at the new and improved www.votefromabroad.org if you haven't done so already. And you can also, what I'm going to say next, donate. Every donation that we get goes to getting out the vote in this midterm election. And one of the best ways that you can donate is through the Amsterdam Canal Pride event. The weekend of August 5th, we're having a fantastic weekend-long event. We do have a boat in the parade, so that's already a once-in-a-lifetime experience. If you can join us for that, look, I'm foaming at the mouth. I'm so excited. If you can join us for that, that would be great. But if you can't join us in Amsterdam, there's lots of different ways that you can support us and help us raise funds to help us get out the LGBTQ vote in the midterm election. Martha is going to put, or maybe I'm going to do it, a link in the chat box right now, right this very minute, where you can see the many different ways that you can donate to this fantastic event. And if you can come to Amsterdam, all the better. It's going to be a fantastic time. And the world press is going to be there along with 500,000 people. Some of them are going to be American and some of them are going to register to vote. And those voters may well make the difference, as will you in this upcoming election. So thank you all for being here. Momentarily, we're going to end the call. Thanks again to the Senator for joining us. But before we go, Martha, do you have any words that you want to say to wrap us up?
Thanks, Bob. Well, I'm delighted, as you are, that we have the Senator back with us again to underline what's important in terms of LGBTQ rights. You know, there's a lot going on and there's a lot of reason to be pessimistic with all these bills that are being passed around in different states. But I think the Senator also points out how important it is that we take our victory laps, that we look and see what's been accomplished over the last year in this administration, that we look at the executive orders, we look at the opportunities to pass legislation at a local level where it can really make a difference. And that we also remember that our rights are very recent and that we have to keep fighting for them. That's all there is. There's, as soon as you sit down and assume it's taken for granted, it's going to be taken away from you. So it's really important that we recall how important it is to speak up, to share our stories, to talk about who we are, and to talk about how all of this impacts us in the world that we want to live in. So that would be my final word. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. It's been really great to have you here.
You know, sharing our stories and talking about these kinds of issues is something that we're going to be doing over the next 2 weeks in a series of events that we're having for Pride Month for the LGBT Caucus, and I'm just trying to find the link for it right now. But I think as I'm finding it, I'll post it in the chat box, but I think that our Vice Chair, Global Vice Chair, Art Shankler, wants to say a word as well. Art?
Hi, I just wanted to make, and in fact, Teresa has put in the chat box, we have another event with a potential senator in the key swing state of North Carolina, Sherry Beasley, who has already won the nomination. And has a good chance to take that open seat, which is currently held by a Republican. I think it's Tom Tillis. She has a very good chance. North Carolina has, you know, wavering on the blue side for a number of years, has occasionally gone blue. It's a really good pickup opportunity for us to add the key votes that we need in the Senate to get all of the legislation that we need passed. So turnout for that, it's on Sunday, I think, and there'll be other events, other candidates talking over the weekend, plus that a very important what's Dialing for Democracy event, because that really is what it's all about. The ultimate voice that we have in influencing policy is at the ballot box, particularly this November. So that's all I'll say. Again, thank you, great event. Senator Baldwin is a great defender of equal rights for everybody, and it was great to have her again. Thank you.
Thanks, Art. And thank you all for joining us. We hope that you'll join us for some of these other events that we're hosting during Pride Week, we're calling it. The link is in the box, so please RSVP and come to Amsterdam if you can, August 5th. Thank you all for joining and have an excellent evening.